Hello and welcome to the next episode of Making Mannequin Heads into Planters. Yay! So, how you doing? What's going on? Hope you're doing really well. So today is a continuation of painting on the mannequin head on foam head? No, caulk head. Oh, caulk head. Oh, that sounds weird. That doesn't sound right. We will not use that name. We'll see. CaulkSaver head, no, because it's CaulkSaver, but you got to pronounce that right without it being suddenly weird. Anyway, so we're continuing painting. I'm using the bronze. It's the folk art bronze, which is very different from the abstract bronze. This is a dark bronze. This is iridescent bronze, whereas the folk art bronze is metallic bronze. The metallic bronze actually comes across very much copper to me. And what I'm doing is I'm painting a second coat because I found that it's a lighter weight paint, lighter body paint as they call it. And all my metallic paints do not do full coverage on a single coat. I don't know, it's just the nature of the metallic paints that I have. Not on super smooth surfaces. On fabric, I found that it actually works beautifully. I made costumes, a few years ago, right before COVID, that were with the masks. They were very cool, and I painted on suit jackets, and then embedded lights and stuff like that. But I used the metallic paints because it was very mechanical feeling, and on the fabric it covered perfectly, like one coat, and it was done. But I find that on on smooth surfaces, it definitely takes more than one coat, or at least it takes much more paint to get the same coverage as other acrylic paints. I don't know why, but it is a little bit got so much more transparency, opacity. Than other non-metallic, non-iridescent acrylics. So the second coat really solidifies the color, makes the sheen come out even better. It makes it look more consistent throughout, less splotchy, which is what you would expect with the second coat. It goes on lightly. All of these do. It's a light to medium body paint. It's not like a watercolor, but it's definitely a light acrylic, or thin acrylic if you want. So I can just, when I don't have other colors around it, I've mentioned this before, I do want to overlap onto the foam that's next to it. That way I don't have to be 100% accurate when I've got two colors butting up against each other, because your eye is not going to notice the transition from one to the other, like the exact line of it, because you've got color to color and not this shiny-ish gray that is the actual basic coat color of the foam that it's on, that is being painted. So these longer pieces are easy to put a second coat on. Doesn't take a lot of time. Just takes actually doing and making sure that you don't splodge onto. So these front pieces are actually done. So I want to be careful around them that I'm not getting messy around them. Yes, remember, where are these going to be? All my mannequin heads are meant to be used outside, right? So all the ones that you make, that's sort of the intent. They're planters. I mean, you can make them so they just stay inside and that they're funky ones inside. That's great too. My deal is that since they're outside, they sort of free me up quite a bit for my level of detail orientedness. My tendency to be very overly compulsive, if you want, or whatever, spending too much time on it's not perfect, right? Perfectionism, as they call it. which I think is a weird term in the psychology world that is used. I think the term is so broad that it's not really a good term to use, but it is used. Because some people refer to themselves, I'm a perfectionist, but when you really look into what they're doing, they're not perfectionists. They get in their own way, not for perfection, but for very other reasons, and very various other reasons. Come across that a lot in coaching for clients, that they're like, oh, I'm a perfectionist, and if it's not perfect, then I don't want to, I spend too much time on it trying to do detail work and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and there are truly, I've had actually 2 clients now who are actually perfectionists, and it gets in their way because they are not allowing themselves to walk away from something until they feel it's perfect. And that's the other thing, it's so subjective. But the other people I've dealt with who call themselves, who I've worked with, who call themselves perfectionists, their personal blocks that they're setting up come from other places. They're and maybe not perfectionists, but they are controlling. They have control aspects of their personality that they need to work on, or they are manipulative. That is another one. So I'm a perfectionist. I won't, let other people do things. No, that's trust. That is other stuff. But it sort of goes under this umbrella of perfectionists. So don't be worrying about that when you're working on this, because it's not going to be perfect around the edges. You could do it so that it's absolutely perfect around the edges, and you will take a very long time doing it. So what we want to do is we want to get it outside so that it can actually be used. If you, like I said though, if you're using it inside and you want it to be really, really, really perfect in your own view of whatever perfection might be, which is subjective to each person, then do it. Take the time. Spend it on it. If you aren't being incapacitated by that, then do you. But for me, I'm doing me, and me is getting it outside so I can appreciate it as a head from afar that has a plantain growing out of the top of it. And in order to do that and have it outside, I need to not be spending too much time, although I'm fiddly doing a lot of detail work on this one. It does get very fiddly. It's actually the amount of time that I feel I need to spend on it to get it clean, looking nice, and always making progress. So there. So now I'm going to, since I've got all that bronzy color, coppery bronzy color, non-aged bronze, first coat on, I'm going to add some more here, and then I'm going to work my way over to adding, there we go, ooh, excuse me, ooh, there it is. I'm going to add the pearlescent ivory on the back here, where I discovered that I actually wanted. I'm just going to add this in a couple more places up here, because then I want those to dry before I add any more paint to this area, because they're starting to be areas that are right next to one another. And if I'm right next to one another and one of these is wet, and I'm working where they come together, it's kind of like, that is problematic, because then I'm getting colors mixing, which normally I absolutely love, but in this case I don't actually. Like, I really intentionally don't want them mixing, so that we have this great contrast. That's a sharp contrast from one tube to the next color-wise. It's just what I'm striving for. And this first coat is See where I come up against this gold that's actually got the two coats. I need to be very careful because I don't want to have to go back and touch up the gold every time that I do another color. There we go. But it's really fun to put on because the first coat is kind of like, all right, let's get it blah, blah, blah. Get it right on there, right? And I am, as I've mentioned each time I do this, I am overlapping to the tubes on both sides if they haven't been finished. That way, when I do paint those tubes on the sides, both sides of it, and if they don't have a second coat or even a first coat, then those tubes I'll finish up the edges, but I don't need to edge and edge and edge and edge and edge. So here we are. This very top piece I'm going to do, and then we'll move to the ivory because this paint is all dry up here. And the nice thing is if I do one of these and I put like copper on one or whatever this color, this bronze, this bright bronze, if I paint it, I'm gonna paint the entire thing all the way, and I don't like it, or I realize, oh crap, I meant to do the one next to it, or well, that ends up not working with the colors that that I had next to it, or blah blah blah, whatever. I get to change my mind. Is my point. For whatever reason that may be, I am not beholden to paint it once, get it done, paint it once, and you can never touch it again. No. I can always change the color of these, especially, and it's actually even easier after getting a single coat of acrylic because I'd be painting acrylic on acrylic instead of acrylic on foam, and so the paint coverage would actually be better if I do decide to change one of the colors that I'm working with on one of the tubes or two of the tubes, whatever. If I look at it and go, it doesn't feel balanced. There. All right, so I'm gonna move away from this bright bronze and I'm working now with the iridescent ivory. And this is in this paint brand. It is called Sennelier Abstract Innovative Acrylic. Comes in a little funky pouch, which I kind of like. It's the same amount as in the hard tubes. The brush that I'm using is this narrower flat tip synthetic brush, which I like the synthetic brushes a lot. And the ivory is a heavier weight than what I was just working with. So this can go on goopier and be a little bit more solid. I want to make sure, I've got, you know what, I can't do this in the spot I wanted to because my bronze paint next to the dark bronze is still wet. And that will just make a mess. So where can I put this on that I don't have wet paint? That's the question. All right, this is all dry. And so next to this copper, feels all dry. Did I put it? I did not put a second coat on there. Oh no. All right, well, I'm gonna have to backtrack here because I missed one little part, but I'm gonna just grab a different brush. It needs to be a soft acrylic brush. Ooh, that's a beautifully soft one. And I'm going to do, this one's a little bit wider if you see the tip, but I'm going to do this right through here with a second coat because it has not received a second coat. I didn't realize that I skipped it. I want to get this second coat on nice and evenly, but put it on as heavy as I can so it's got great coverage and it'll just make that color really look so much better. Let's see if I can get the rest of this tube down. There it is. Like I said before, this is a very lightweight, it's considered a bronze, but it's a folk art crafts paint, and it's significantly thinner than a lot of other paints. So as you put it on, you really need a soft brush Otherwise you're putting it on and taking it off at the same time. And I want to put it on pretty thickly because it never has gone on smooth surfaces without feeling like it's got some translucence to it, not fully opaque. So that means that it's like, it doesn't go on super, super, super solid feeling, which is what I want. I want these to really seem like metal. I want them to look like metal, which means that they can't be splotchy or spludgy, whatever you want to call it, whatever version of that word works. So this will do that, putting it on nice and heavy, well, however heavy I actually can with this paint. And there we go. That's much better. So something that they do have that I am considering buying for this specifically is that they being like hardware stores and stuff, is now beautifully enough so that, you know, spray paints, I've been talking about how spray paint doesn't stick to this stuff. It sticks to it initially and then it just flakes and comes off. It doesn't stay stuck to it, and it doesn't flex with the tubing very well, and it separates. It's a very weird experience, which is great if you want it to come off, but I really don't want it to come off for this one. Here we go, I'm done with that color now. So I have seen that, and they've done this for years, they've had it for years, but it's kind of nice in case you didn't know that they have it. They have acrylic spray paint, wonderfully enough. The spray paint is just like this acrylic here that is beautiful acrylic paint in a spray bottle. So it's kind of like it's either acrylic or latex. I'm pretty sure it's latex or acrylic latex blend. It's kind of like, you know, what you would buy to physically paint a chair or something. It's not, you know, oil based. It's actually, oddly enough, water based paint in a spray. And it's pretty light. It doesn't go on goopy, but it goes on with pretty darn good coverage. So one of the things that I'm thinking is that I may tape this off and use that on these, the ones that I'm painting right now. I want to see how these work with this paint. And that way I'd be able to get at all angles with it and really get in the nooks and crannies. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to get myself some, we got to go and get oil to change the oil on the snowblower. So while I'm there, I'm going to look at acrylic spray paint, because then I could tape all of this other stuff off very lightly and spray this whole area and just mask out the other. So how am I doing with this dark bronze? I'm pretty good. I'm going to start painting. I'm going to start at the top, because this is mostly dry. And I'm going to put the iridescent ivory, which I've got a lot on my palette, a lot more than I'm going to be using. I'm going to just start with the first coat on here. I have a light first coat of the light bronze on these pieces right here that I'll need to finish up, but they're little teeny pieces, so it's not like I'm going to be working against myself to try to paint up against one another and do, you know, sharp lines between the pieces. Whereas if I was doing it on long pieces, I would be working against myself, not having any ability to overlap. There we go. So I'm just gooping it right on there, because this is definitely a heavier weight paint. And I want that real lightness of the or brightness of this iridescent, opalescent is it iridescent? It's opalescent. Iridescent, no, it's iridescent. Opalescent would be multicolored. Pearl. So it's something very different from my other colors. The real metal colors. And because the gold next to it is finished, I've got to be careful and put it on with good detail. Slow myself down a little bit, so I'm glooping it on, but I'm not just being messy with it. I'm just putting it on heavily. There we go. So those are done. Where else can I put this? That paints are dry. It's hard once you're working in so many areas, you know, that you don't have dry paint. Here we go. I can do a row down here because I haven't painted actually at all down here. So let's get this going. Yeah, so that's the challenge that I'm coming across right now, is really figuring out how do I approach the stubby pieces on the front for painting. What I was originally going to do before I started painting with this was I was going to just do the tips, just the ends of them, and leave the bases the gray of the foam. Well, I found that as I was painting along the edges of it, I was getting paint on the sides of the pieces because of having to get in there to get these colors to work. So that's 1, 2, 3, it's this one. Instead, I'm going to have to figure out something else. And I think using the spray paint that way might be that good something else. So that I could really get full coverage, and then, so the bases would be all the same color, right? And then whatever color I do the bases on, maybe do black would be kind of cool. If I did that, then I would worry about these paints not showing up that well. So I'll see what they have in there. I don't think they'll have any metallics or iridescents in that kind of a spray paint. But I'll take a look, see what they've got. I've got to go to hardware store, like I said, soon. So I'll take a look while I'm there, and then we'll see. I'm going actually tomorrow, so future episodes will let you know what I found, what kind of ideas I'm going to use. Black is my initial thought. That would be kind of cool, because then if I could really get these paints to cover well. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2 is really where I want to be on this side because it covered differently. If I could get these paints to really cover well over black base, it would be really beautiful. They would really shine. It would be a cool effect. But I'm going to have to do a couple tests where, because I have black paint, but I'm just not sure that it's going to. I'll do black acrylic on some of this tube and then let it dry, and then see if putting the metallic paint over it will even have sufficient coverage to not just look insubstantial, if you will. All right, now I'm going to use silver. I'm moving to silver. I put a lot of that iridescent pearl down. The coverage is so light that I'm only using it in a few places. But I do want to use silver because it actually will give me a nice coverage. And we'll do a couple of silver ones, and then we'll call it a day. Let's get some of the silver on. I'm gonna go back to this brush. So I'm gonna start at the top, I think, and work my way down. Get that silver nice and well mixed. And start up here. The silver I didn't think would be that much different from the gray. I'm gonna do it on both sides, and then I'll add another one up here. But it ends up, because it's got so much shine to it when it dries, this silver paint specifically, it actually is very different from the gray. It's very pretty. The first one I did was this one around the face, And I was like, holy crap, that really covers beautifully. Single coat. And I think it's because it's on the gray. But I think the silver just is a more solid color, oddly enough, paint-wise. So I'm doing that one. You see how it's more of a gray color right now. Once it dries, it really becomes shiny and liquid shiny. So it's really kind of cool. It's very pretty. And I was debating, if you saw previous episodes, I was debating on whether or not I was going to leave some of these tubes unpainted. And the more I looked at it, the more they looked just sort of unpainted. And I leave them unpainted. So I nixed that idea and decided that I'm just going to go ahead and paint all of them. And you know, quite honestly, if I was somebody else, I could have just I could have just left it the tubes, right? Just done the face and left it there. You know, I look at it now and I'm just like, well, that would have actually looked really freaking cool, just leaving it as it was. So I'm going to do silver down the front here. I think I want to actually do this one in silver as well. And I'll figure out that front one, what color that's going to be. But yeah, so I could have just left the gray of the tubing and it would have looked awesome because it would have been so unique looking. But you know, for me, it's like, oh, well, I could do more. And, you know, that's a call of, you know, when do you stop? We've talked about this in past episodes. When is it done? Done. Because, I mean, I could literally work on this for a year and it would go through so many permutations. I could do all of this antiquing on it. I could do all of this wet and dry brushing and buffing and then bring in colors. I could put lights on. I mean, I could do, in my imagination, I could do so many things with this. If I do that, it goes all the way around, so I'm not going to do that. I guess I'll just have an extra one on that side. So at some point you got to just say, basta, enough, right? All right, I'm doing this one on each side. Very good. So making that decision of, and it's done, and I'm walking away from it, is often very, very difficult. When you're painting an abstract painting, like I do, knowing when it's done is often sort of like it's like a shock to my system. I'll be working, like hardcore, beating on the canvas with my brushes and paint and mixing and flowing and working within the sort of parameters that I've given myself for color and the story that I'm telling color-wise and how I'm taking your eye through it and the experience I'm having with it. And I'll step away and I'll suddenly be like, well, shit, I'm done. And it's startling. It's like, it takes like all the air out of me. And, which is satisfying, but also, you know, I actually tend to, when I have that moment, I'll stand back and be like, well, holy crap. Or I'll giggle. I'll look at it and be like, and I'll just literally, it's a weird thing. I do this, but it is what I do. I laugh out loud. I will just sort of guffaw. And what's a guffaw? It's I go, ha! And I'm done. That's weird. Because the other part of that is I'm working in acrylics on big canvas. And when I do it, I am mixing on the canvas. So I am limited to time. Time is one of my big determining factors in my paintings. If I leave a painting and let it completely dry and come back to it, so it doesn't take long for it to dry, like we're talking just a matter of, you know, minutes at times, depending on how heavily I put on paint. But the surface will dry literally in minutes. So if I'm working in an area on that painting and I'm mixing on the canvas in acrylics, not in oil, and I've got a flow going on and I want to incorporate it into a section that has already been painted and is already dried, then I need to rework that section with new paint over the top because it's going to be covering, yada, yada, yada. So all of that is going on. So there's the difference between the silver and the iridescent pearl. That's iridescent pearl. This is the silver. Big difference, right? When you see them next to each other. Far apart from each other, not such a big difference. Right up next to each other, big old difference. But yeah, so I'll just like guffaw and I'll be like, and I'm done. And if I try to go back, and I've experienced this a number of times where I try to go in and I'm like, oh, that section feels like it needs to change. Nope, it ain't changing. I ain't changing it. I can't go in and be like, oh, I'm just going to add this to it. There's no adding to it. It's going over it. You are literally painting over what you've got there. And because it was mixed on the canvas, you can never replicate the colors and the paint that you have on there. So it is very much, when you're done, you're done. Unless you're just going to use that canvas over again and paint over it. So it could be very startling that you're like, and I'm done. I guess I'm done. Walking away, and it is what it is. And I've had some where I've been like, and I'm done, and I'm not happy with it, and I start over completely from scratch with it. I literally put down a new base coat. I always start with base coats, not gesso, but I use gessoed canvases, but like new color story start, sectioned out the whole deal. That much I actually do plan. Where's my silver? Where did I put my silver paint? I need more. And there it is. And I have to just completely do a new painting. What's interesting is when I do that, because I do paint heavily when I do all my mixing, so there's significant texture on the canvas of the paint. When I do that, and I paint over one, you can still see the texture of the paint from below. And it's actually kind of neat because it does change the way the finished painting on top, when I do the next layer or the new version, it does change it because I do a lot with how the paint works with the textures underneath. It does affect it. So it's actually kind of cool. I got to go with it. You can't fight it. If I fight it, I'm fighting myself, and it's counterproductive. So I just have to be in the moment to allow it to be textured that way, and let myself flow with it as well as the paint flow with it. So it's a very fun process. I like it. I like it a lot. It's very, very interesting, very humbling, and exciting at the same time. All right, I gotta get going here. Let me just do 2 more of these, and then I'll be done for the day. Just adding these here, doing an overlap to the side ones when they're not finished. Oops. This does, the silver is like a 1-coat wonder. Beautiful paint. Weirdly enough, the amount of silver pigment that's in here is significantly more than the other paints. It coats fully in that 1 coat. It's incredible. Especially when directly compared to the other paints. So that one was, I did both sides here, and then I'm doing one next to the white, the iridescent pearl on this side, and then I'll be done, right? Is that correct? So there's one in between. These sides don't match up exactly. They've got a different number of tubes, or whatever you want to call them. Like I said, can't really call them tubes because they're not hollow. So Not sure what you would call it. What if the silver next to the white will really show up the difference? The pearl. There we go. And I'm done with that. Alrighty. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and give yourself lots of space to make mistakes and learn from them, right? And I hope you enjoy following me through this process of painting and exploring options with the Mannequin Heads. There we go. That's better. I could see it. Nobody else would have. And treat other people well. Treat yourself well. Give other people lots of room to make mistakes as well, if you can. It's very, very hard to do. Let them be them, and you be you. You focus on you. And take a big breath in. Big breath out. Now react to other people. Try it. It's worth trying. It's hard to remember to do in the moment, but it's worth doing. All right? Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.